only way I can explain this, because Jeffrey Lurie is pretty, you know, straight ahead, man. I mean, he just fired a head coach who won the Super Bowl. He just essentially fired a quarterback he thought was the face of the franchise, and agreed to pay $128 million, and ended up eating $34 million of that, an NFL record. So that tells you this guy thinks, okay, I made a mistake from that standpoint. I'll move on from that. But when it comes to him, when it comes to his own behavior, there's no correction. The correction was post Chip Kelly, when he said, I lost too much control of this organization. I'm never going to do that again. Yeah. There's got to be a happy medium there, I would think.
It is a hump day get-together here on Birds 365. Your home for Birds Talk 365. You figured out the name. You got it down now. 365 days a year. Well, not quite, because we're not here on the weekends. We are in spirit, but maybe not physically. It's your Mac and Mac guys. Mac and Mac Part 2. John McMullen, Jody McDonald here with you to talk Birds for the next 2 hours. Football in general, because there are some overall league issues that we will touch on over the next 2 hours. Mr. McMullen, how are you this morning?
Doing well, Jody. Back at it. You're right, Birds 365. The title is self-explanatory, and news never stops in the NFL, whether it's about the Eagles' dysfunction or about the league in general. We were talking a little bit off the air about off-season work already. We're up to, I think it's 3 teams that have opted out not opted out, because they're wrangling and they're saying they're not going to show up for voluntary work. And that's what the NFLPA wants. They want no off-season work for veteran players, especially, Jody. That opens a can of worms, though. A lot of worms with that can.
I got a whole bunch of things as far as questions go that I hope you know better than I do. I understand the way the NFLPA works and what they're attempting to do, but there are some major questions with this particular stance that they're taking. We'll get into that, but do want to start with the Birds, because Bo Wolf, one of the triumvirate who put the article together that questioned the dysfunction in Eagle Land these days, is going to join us coming up in about less than 20 minutes from now, somewhere thereabouts. And I did get some calls last night. I was on WIP last night, and I can legitimately say there is concern amongst Eagle Nation. I don't want to say that my show is the sounding board for all things Eagles or Philadelphia sports. I got a disturbed and somewhat large following that come on my show.
You can say it, Jody.
I have confidence in the crew that does listen and or reach out and touch me at nights. There are some people that really are wondering, where is the direction of this team going? That it's just a scant few years since the Eagles won a Super Bowl. How could things go astray this fast with this organization? And certainly the guys from The Athletic put together a picture that is not necessarily pretty, and one that doesn't have all the answers. And we're coming up on a pretty important time, just over 2 weeks from now, when the Eagles have an 11-pick day, or 3 days, in the NFL draft that will either help to turn this thing around and or continue the dysfunction. We'll either get this to be an improved team for 4-11-1, or stay further mired in last year's awful season and sitting at the top of the draft again next year. Eagles fans don't believe in the rebuild. What was the word that Jeff Lurie used? Transactional year, or
transition
year?
Yeah.
Eagle fans don't want to hear anything about transitions. They want improvement starting next year. And if you read the article done by the 3 guys at The Athletic, I don't think that's in the offing in 2021. Do you, John?
No, that's one of the things they kind of agreed on, is the fact that there's no self-awareness. So if you look at constructive criticism, I think everybody thinks, Jeffrey Lurie certainly means well. I don't think anybody thinks he's actively trying to undermine his team. He's trying to do what he thinks is best for the Philadelphia Eagles. And, he's, if anything, he's very self-assured. I give him that. He really believes and how he runs this organization. maybe that's one of the problems. You hear it all the time with powerful people, Jody. They surround themselves with people who are going to say, you're great, yes to everything. And it's really difficult to get that constructive criticism to them. That's the only way I can explain this, because Jeffrey Lurie is pretty, straight ahead, man. I mean, he just fired a head coach who won the Super Bowl. He just essentially fired a quarterback he thought was the face of the franchise and agreed to pay $128 million and ended up eating $34 million of that, an NFL record. So that tells you this guy thinks, okay, I made a mistake from that standpoint. I'll move on from that. But when it comes to him, when it comes to his own behavior, there's no correction. The correction was post Chip Kelly, when he said, I lost too much control of this organization. I'm never going to do that again. Yeah. There's got to be a happy medium there, I would think.
So would I. And it's funny that you went there with Carson Wentz, because that was my stance both here on Birds 365 and my WIP show last night as well. The fact that they did move on from Carson Wentz after having built up Carson Wentz, paid Carson Wentz, put Carson Wentz on a pedestal, it all came down, crumbling down pretty damn quickly in the course of certainly less than 1 year in a calendar and basically 1 year in an NFL season. But they did the right thing, despite the fact that their previous actions should have told them, no, we're committed here. Maybe we need to continue to work on this. Maybe there is a turnaround in the offing that we can get this ship righted and going back in the right direction. They didn't. And I thought, and I'm pretty sure you agree with me, that was the right thing to do. There wasn't any repairing Carson Wentz. Even with a new coach, that wasn't going to repair Carson Wentz. He wanted out. He had a bad year. He lost what footing he had in the locker room. It might not have been good enough to begin with, but the shaky footing that he had completely went out from underneath him. So they needed to do what they had to do. And even though it was a difficult task, sucking up $33 million in dead cap hit, they did it. And I thought that showed promise that the Eagles could admit when something went awry, admit that they had made an evaluation, acted upon it, yet after further evaluation, they said, we made the wrong call. We need to correct it. As costly a correction as it was, that gave me hope that the Eagles were good enough at self-evaluating that when things went wrong, they could do it. The article that the guys in The Athletic wrote told me, don't get crazed about this. There's still a whole bunch of dysfunction in
either land. And the most interesting part perhaps was the realization that it's not going to change. The part with Jeffrey Lurie and how he handles things, the communication between him and Howie Roseman, the coaching staff, Howie Roseman, the analytics department. I think that's the interesting thing, because this organization kind of frames itself as being very collaborative. Everybody's involved, and it seems behind the scenes, it's the exact opposite. It's basically you're bundling information to the most important man in the building through one other man. So he's getting only one lens, and that's Howie Roseman's lens, and he seems very, very comfortable with it. And maybe we need a different setup. Maybe we need, say, a three-pronged approach where the head coach reports to the owner, the GM reports to the owner, maybe even a personnel. It's not going to happen. I'm saying maybe that would be the better approach. But look, Jeffrey Lurie is looking at everything else in his organization except himself. That's what I take out of this.
I'll give you my take on the three-pronged approach. They tried it in New York with the Jets. The owner hired both the coach and the general manager at the same time and said, I expect both of you guys individually to report to me. That the coach didn't necessarily report to the general manager. Disaster. It was awful.
I'm not, and let me jump in real quick, Jody. I'm not saying it's automatically going to work. I'm saying when you have something that isn't working, so when you're using the Jets example, well, you say, okay, these three men or whatever, the three-pronged approach, it's not working here, and you've got to go in a different direction. What I'm saying with the Eagles is this approach is not working. So de facto, let's try something else. Doesn't guarantee it's going to work.
Correct. And I don't think the approach works, period. What you need is, if you're going to do it the standard way they do it in the National Football League, the owner hires the general manager / president. He reports directly to the owner. The owner and the general manager, in collaboration, there's that favorite word, hire the head coach. The head coach reports to the general manager, and the general manager reports to the owner. That there's a chain of command. I think that's absolutely the best way to do it. Between you and me, it might be the only way to do it. I don't think the three-pronged approach works.
I don't know about three-pronged, but I'll give you an example. Bill Belichick.
Okay.
Like, I agree with you. Traditional setups are usually the best, and that's where the coach reports to the general manager. As you said, the general manager reports to the owner. Traditionally, if you have people that are comfortable with each other, that trust each other, I agree with you. I think that's the best setup. One of the things I talked about with Doug Peterson, because even media people in Philadelphia who were around during the Andy Reid regime got used to a head coach who had tremendous, tremendous power. And they looked at Doug Peterson, and I always joke with Mike Sealski, our buddy who we just had on the show. He did that Ficus Plant column about Doug Peterson when he was up there doing draft prep, and he wasn't talking. And I said, traditionally in the NFL, that's how it works. You're not involved as the head coach. The GM is the offseason, Howie season, and the end season is for the coach. The GM gives the team to the coach to coach. That's the traditional way. But you do have Bill Belichick. You do have Pete Carroll, who have been extremely successful and yield more power. Belichick is essentially the de facto GM as well with the Patriots. Carroll has more power than John Schneider, but they work very well together. But that's a big job. I don't advocate any coach tries to take on that job. The problem here is Howie Roseman, there's a history there, and he doesn't get along with a lot of people, at least for a long shelf life type of period.
Here's why I think the scenarios that you're describing are surely outliers. How many Super Bowls has Belichick won? Yeah. Once you start racking up
outliers,
multiple Super Bowls, you're going to have more say than the average NFL coach has, and you've earned it, and you deserve it, and I tip my cap, and yes, you can become, quote unquote, the man within the organization. Yes, Bill Belichick has done that, and a little different in Seattle, whereas Pete Carroll, I believe, was hired first, and he was involved in the hiring of Schneider. Do I have that correct?
Yeah, and they work, by the way, they work tremendously. It doesn't, see, to me, if you find two people that work well together, it really doesn't matter, because as a head coach with power, you don't have enough time in the day to worry about college scouting during the season. So ultimately, all it comes down to is you're hiring people that you trust, or you're bringing people around you that you trust. When it doesn't work, you have that distrust between each part of the organization. That seems to be what's going on in Philadelphia. That seems to be what's going on to me.
Do you believe that's the reason why? And again, this was all reports. I never talked to anybody. I'm sure you talked to some people. The fact that the Eagles considered hiring McDaniels as a head coach during
I'm glad you brought that up, Jody.
Give me the background on that. I figured that had to be a Howie kind of, when Jeffrey was courting him and or flirting with him, Howie was thinking along the lines that you were just talking about. There needs to be a relationship between the general manager and the coach. Even if the power base is 90-10, you still have to coexist. You have to be on the same page. You have to be able to work with a guy. I figured Howie said, McDaniels and I are going to be oil and water. It's just not going to work. And he sold Jeff Lurie on that they never even got that far down the road with McDaniels.
See, I heard, and it surprised me, I heard the exact opposite. I heard that Howie wanted to bring Josh McDaniels in, and essentially Jeffrey Lurie saved Howie, because Jeffrey Lurie realized look, these two guys can say whatever they want, but ultimately they're not going to get along. And by the way, I think Jeffrey Lurie's 100% right.
Right. So do I.
Yes. So in a lot of ways, yeah, it was very strange. The talk around the league was that Howie was pushing for Josh McDaniels. But, and we're going to have Bo Wolf on in a couple minutes. And as I ruminated over their story a little bit over the day yesterday after our show, I started thinking about the coaching search. And I started thinking about, because there were heavy whispers, Josh McDaniels was going to be the next coach of this team.
Oh, yeah.
And, as bad as Josh was in his first opportunity in Denver, and that was as bad as it gets, he left Indianapolis at the altar. He still has this reputation. He still has this, he's had 100 head coaching interviews. He always thinks another one is around the corner. I started to think to myself, Josh McDaniels would not have accepted those Tuesday meetings with the owner. But I believe that. Now, I'm not saying that that's what happened, but if that was run across him, I don't think Josh McDaniels in any way would have agreed to that. Andy Reid didn't have to agree to that. That's, if you have some gravitas as a head coach, you're not agreeing to that nonsense. What Bo and the guys explained, Doug Peterson going in after upsetting Green Bay, and he's getting criticized. Could you imagine Josh McDaniels putting up with that?
And I understand, and I think your sources are actually on point, that it could have been from afar. It just seemed to me like Howie would be the one who would put a kibosh on McDaniels, not the other way around. That Howie was the one who was fighting for him, and Jeffrey was the one who said, now, wait a minute. It does make some sense when you think about it, because you're right. When McDaniels did what he did with Indianapolis, he more or less left both the general manager and the owner, but the owner had to feel a sting to be left at the altar. After they'd hired assistant coaches to work with McDaniels, he says, yeah, no, never mind. I didn't put pen to paper. I'm going back to Uncle Bill in New England. They've already given those contracts. The assistant coaches said, well, no, we're signed. We're planning on showing up to work. Luckily, they hired Frank Reich, who incorporated those guys into his staff, and they didn't pay the price as much as they could have. But the owner, Irsay, had to be so ticked off at that.
Oh, yeah.
That's I don't know if Jeff called Irsay and said, how bloody was it? How bad was it? And that started it down the road of this ain't happening. But I was thinking as to why Howie would want to do something like that. It didn't make sense.
No idea.
From either perspective. Maybe it was Howie, because part of what we get out of the article done by the triumvirate of athletic writers, and Bo Wolf will join us in less than 5 minutes, is, this guy will shoot himself in the foot at some point. I'll get some good coaching results out of him, but then at some point, he'll do something really foolish, and Jeffrey will get really ticked off. And the reason that the Eagles built up and then fell back down, never built up, will be put at his doorstep, and it will have the microscope off Howie Roseman. Because if nothing that we've seen over the last couple of years stands out as much as Howie Rose, the ultimate survivor, Howie's pretty smart at this. He's gotten very good at playing the NFL executive game. He knows that, let me shine the light on someone else if there's blame to be had, so it doesn't shine directly at me. It's probably a good way to keep in the position that you're in for the last decade.
Yeah. I mean, all you got to know about Howie Roseman is typically if you're a general manager in this league, you don't get to pick as many coaches in one spot as Howie Roseman. I mean, it just doesn't happen. So to call him the ultimate survivor, I think is pretty fair at this point.
But this, again, ties back to the article that we're going to talk about Bo Wolf with coming up here in just a couple of minutes. How much is Howie really picking the head coach? You just mentioned it's a poor head coach. It seems to me, without being a fly in the wall when they're having their meetings and making these decisions, maybe this is a lot more Jeffrey's decision than it is Howie.
Oh, Howie is just completely Jeffrey. But it should be. He's the owner of the team. I have no problem when he chimes in on the head coach or even the quarterback. When you start to chime in on draft picks and position coaches, then I go, that's a bridge too far.
We'll talk about that with our next guest. Bo Wolf, one of the 3 authors of the big story on The Athletic about the Eagles' dysfunction. He's going to join us next. Stay right here with us on Birds 365.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.
Welcome to the Wildwoods, the perfect place where you can safely do everything or nothing at all. Catch a wave, take a nap, go for a drive, grab a bite. It's your vacation, and we're doing everything we can to make it a safe one. The Wildwoods. Your vacation, your way.
The middle. Yo, bro, I know we're going to get on that, but I got to say happy birthdays to the kids in the stream. You know what I'm saying? We checking it out. Happy birthday to your kids, man. You know what I'm saying?
Who?
The kids, man. I'm watching the stream, man.
What stream?
It's double birthdays.
You got to keep your eyes off that stream. Yeah, seriously. You have a conversation with the stream, and nobody has any idea what you're talking about.
You got to give us a heads up.
Get you hip to it.
Because
I gotta get you hip to it.
No.
We have no idea what you're talking about. So now we're in the middle of something, and it's like, whoa. Happy birthday. Happy birthday to who? I have no idea what's going on right now.
I can just imagine people listening on Sports Map Radio just like, what did he just say? Who's he
Play
talking
action
to?
real. Play action real. His son Nick. Happy birthday, bro.
All right. Now everybody's got a birthday. Joey B's daughter, 16 today.
Yeah.
Calling BS today.
Seriously. This is like AC Green selling that he was a virgin back with Showtime.
The Middle with Eitan Shander, Barrett Brooks, and Harry Mays. Weekdays from 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern.
The International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers.
If you missed any of today's show on the JAKIB Media channel, listen to the podcast on your way home. Available on YouTube, Apple, and Spotify.